Hey guys, welcome to our devlog for Veil of Maia. This game is a story-driven, combat-focused metroidvania and is inspired by some of our favorite games like Hollow Knight, Ori and the Blind Forest, Illusion of Gaia, and Kingdom Hearts. We sold our house to fund this game, and we're documenting every stage of the game's progress with this series. Last time we did a whole lot of bug fixing, and as much as I really wanted to continue doing that, there was something far more important that needed to be looked at. Our game hook wasn't fun. A game hook is something that makes your game unique, something that makes it stand out from the crowd. Our hook is the player's telekinesis ability, and it sounds like it should be fun. You could magically pick up enemies and fling them around, smash them into walls or obstacles, and even other enemies. I could picture fun scenarios where you could pick up an enemy and dunk them into a pool of acid or lava. And yet, even when I was playing our game, I avoided the ability and usually used the projectile ability instead. And I noticed the same thing when other people played the game as well. This was a clear sign that something needed to change. And this is our game hook, the most important ability in the whole game. We have to get this right. And I needed help. I asked you guys to come try it out and leave some feedback. And oh man, you guys gave some great feedback. I had everything I needed. I had high-level comments like, here's how it should feel, as well as hyper-specific comments like the controls would work better with these buttons, and you should still be able to move when using the ability. But overall, the popular opinion was that it needed some serious work. Nikki and I studied the feedback forms as well as made our own list of what was needed to improve telekinesis. And in the end, I had a massive list of things I could change to make this ability fun and juicy. And I gotta tell you, the final results are better than I'd ever hoped, and I can't wait to show you. So up until this point, telekinesis was a free ability. It didn't cost any resources to use. It had a maximum amount of time you could use it for, which was this green bar, but that was it. We'll see this here? That's your essence meter, and you can use it to heal the player for 2 health beads, and it uses all your essence. What I want is for players to need to choose defense or offense, heal yourself or attack enemies from a safe distance. And having the ability cost no resources meant players weren't given this choice. So we scrapped the maximum timer. And at the same time, I wanted to greatly increase the range of the ability. It was far too short and made the ability feel cramped and restricted. Now, once the range was fixed, the next obvious problem was the camera. I could fling enemies around the room till my little heart was content, but it doesn't matter if you can't see where the enemy is. So obviously, I immediately sat down and worked on the camera control. Psych! It's time for particles. I mean, honestly, there was no visual indicator that telekinesis was being used. This is the first iteration of the effect, and you'll see them change and improve throughout the video as I kind of made little tweaks here and there. Alright, time to fix the camera. And I mean, obviously, that camera snapping is intentional, and I knew exactly what was causing it, and there were no problems whatsoever. Yeah, so that was a lie. I had no idea what was happening. Turns out the camera's level boundary wasn't playing nicely with the camera's follow the player and telekinesis target system. And so when it reached a certain threshold, it would just override the level boundary altogether. And after considering what I could possibly do to correct this, I checked this little box down here and it was a-okay. Now it just smoothly zooms out when we run into that situation. And finally, telekinesis now costs essence to use. Now, this ability works by slowly applying a force over time to the enemy. So there's an acceleration and deceleration with the movement. Some people liked this and some didn't. I personally do. But I think when you have an ability that works this way, when you change direction, there's a moment before the speed buildup in the new direction. The ability can feel unresponsive, like the game's not listening to your input. So I added this little arrow around the enemy that shows the direction of your input, which I found somehow just made it feel better. Next, a common request I got was to be able to fling enemies around. Players wanted to be able to pick up an enemy and slingshot them into a wall, or pick the enemy up and just drop them to damage them. Currently, damage could only be dealt while telekinesis was actually active. Boring. So first I got the fling working properly. No damage yet, but now they gain momentum and continue speeding in that same direction even after you release the telekinesis button. Next, I added gravity in at the right time so you could just drop the enemies. And finally, I did get them taking damage from these effects. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but that got ironed out later and I was happy with it. It was starting to look and feel much better, but something was missing. Some other element to make it even more fun. So I added the burst effect. Now, when you're using telekinesis, you can press the right trigger to get a huge burst of speed. See what I did there? It's called burst because you get a burst of Now obviously it needs some sound and particles to really feel right. This still felt lacking though, so I actually added more of them, which rotate and face whatever direction you're moving the enemy towards, which is super satisfying and makes it feel really responsive. Speaking of particles, I was using the same ones for your normal melee attack and telekinesis. So obviously telekinesis needed its own, and I feel like these pair really nicely with the ability. It has a good impact feel. Remember how I said even I didn't use telekinesis when I was playing the game?
And yet, even when I was playing our game, I avoided the ability and usually used the projectile ability instead.
Well, one of the big reasons for that was just how easy it was to accidentally damage yourself by knocking an enemy into your character. I've done it hundreds of times at this point, so that's gone now. I'll need more playtesting with proper levels to see if this was the right design decision, but right now it just feels more fun this way. To tie up a loose end from earlier, telekinesis now costs essence, but currently the only way to replenish it is to damage enemies with your normal attack. I want telekinesis to be fairly forgiving. Players need a full essence meter to heal, so I don't want you to feel like you have to hoard your essence all the time and never use telekinesis. So now you'll get some essence back when you damage an enemy, and if you can damage 2 enemies at once, then you'll get twice the essence, which feels really good. I added a nice shockwave effect as well to showcase when time slows down and speeds up. There was a rabbit hole of research and testing necessary to get this working, but it was totally worth it because I love it. Another common request I got was to be able to use telekinesis on other things in the scene, like dead enemy bodies. I went nuts with this. Anyway, maybe even a little overboard. I don't know, you tell me. You can use telekinesis on alive enemies, dead enemies. You can use it on rocks. You can use it on these hangy guys. You can use it on these rope bridges I made. You can freaking hit a chest, collect the money, jump inside, close the chest, and fly around the room like Superman trapped in a chest. It might be a bit overpowered. Big changes, small changes, doesn't matter. I wanted to fix everything with this ability. See how the arrow is further out than the actual point you're hitting? That's been fixed! He even turns around when he's aiming. I know. Thank you. Thanks so much. I'd like to thank my Now, another common theme I saw with the feedback was a request for some sort of lock-on or aim assist. And they're 100% right, especially when you're aiming at something far away, it can be really tricky to line it up. So before I tackled the lock-on, I added an aim scope just to make aiming slightly easier. Don't worry, the laser doesn't go through the walls forever. To tackle the lock-on, I essentially cast out an invisible wide beam in the direction of your aim. That beam can detect colliders in the scene, and if those colliders are valid targets, it will lock on to whichever enemy is closest to the player. And of course, once you're locked onto an enemy, the beam is cast from the enemy itself, so you can swap targets easily. You can see how it works here. It worked really great when enemies were spaced well apart, but if the enemies were too close together, you'd run into some problems. See how I'm aiming to the right, but it just keeps switching between these 2 enemies? That's because the beam starts as a large circle around the enemy. So the solution I came up with was to pivot the starting point of the beam around the enemy in your aim direction. This really helped and made it feel much better. Thank you. Thanks. You guys are too kind. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I want to thank my fans. And to top it off, we needed to make the targets pop a bit. That's feeling much better now. If you don't have enough essence to use the ability, it now gives you a good, clear indicator. Before, I didn't have a proper check in place, so it played the sound effects and particles, but didn't start the ability. I made sure to stabilize the player when he's using the ability, so this can't happen anymore. Also added the ability to just drop objects on enemies, which will damage them. And what's really cool is now the mass of the object you drop affects the damage amount. So this one does 4, and this one does 6. Very nice. Before, you aimed with the left analog stick, but I changed the entire control scheme, and now you aim with the right stick, which frees up the left one, allowing you to actually walk around while using telekinesis. Now for the cherry on top to really just tie everything together. We needed a new animation to play when telekinesis first started, because it just doesn't pop like this. I'm not much of an artist, but I tried to draw a rough idea of what I thought would be a cool animation and gave it to Nikki, and she was like, "What?" So I did the next obvious thing and put on my bathrobe and showed her in person. If this isn't cool, I don't know what is. And also, there were good work reasons for the bathrobe. Now, to really make you feel the impact of this ability, I wanted to freeze time just for the 5 frames of this animation and then snap it back to normal, which, you know, didn't go great the first try. He's still fighting back though. Respect. And here it is finished. The ability is so much fun to use now. I'd love to know what you think of the changes down below, or if you have any cool ideas you'd like to see implemented.